that online harms bill, which people will see is very, very specifically focused on protecting kids and not on censoring the internet as misinformation and as the right wing tends to try and characterize it as.
But I want to be crystal clear about what the Online Harms Act does not do. It does not undermine freedom of speech. It enhances free expression by empowering all people to safely participate in online debate.
What does Justin Trudeau mean when he says the word hate speech? He means speech he hates.
They're basically trying to regulate to death independent content creators, or at least create some exposure to regulate the internet. And it's only to give back this benefit, this sort of quasi-monopoly that legacy media had.
In his recent unveiling of the Online Harms Bill C-63, Justin Trudeau aims to address online safety, replacing Bill C-36, who failed following the snap election call in August 2021. However, questions arise regarding its true purpose, especially as existing criminal code offenses already cover child sexual exploitation concerns cited by the Liberals. Don't forget to visit stopthecensorship.ca, where you can sign our petition to support our fight against censorship laws and advocate for their repeal. To delve deeper into the bill's implication, Viva Frei, a YouTuber and lawyer, shed light on its provision. The bill targets hate propaganda, proposing amendment to the criminal code and the Canadian, including a defined notion of hatred in section 390. It also permits penalties up to life imprisonment for advocating genocide and 2 to 5 years for indictment prosecutions. The potential for overreach and censorship looms large, as determining what constitutes hate speech remain subjective. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre warns of potential censure of expressing unacceptable views under Bill C-63. The bill also established 3 new bodies: a Digital Safety Commission, a Digital Safety Ombudsman, and a Digital Safety Office. Their mandate is to ensure social media platforms comply with the Online Harms Act. Is this another step towards government control and compliance? The question remains, will Bill 63 generally protect online spaces, or will it inadvertently stifle discourse and prosecute individuals over speech that may not truly constitute hate? Now let's hear Viva Frei comprehensive analysis.
For those of you out there in Canada who might not know who I am, David Freiheit, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, Viva Frei on the channel. I read the Bill C-63 today and picked the brains of people who I think are legally more insightful than me, and it's wild. It's wild.
So what is your main comprehension of the bill?
This is the slow walk towards full tyranny. Remember, like back in the day, Bill C-16, when it added gender expression and gender identity to aggravating factors for hate crimes in the criminal code, and Jordan Peterson came out and was, flagging or ringing the warning bell saying this is going to lead to compelled speech. They're trying to define hatred in this law, like actually creating a legal definition of hatred, and it's so patently insane. But my analysis is that once upon a time they tried to define hatred. It was a couple of years ago, and it was a joke when they tried to do it at the time. And that session ended because they called the election, and now they're just picking right back up and cramming it through the same way they crammed through the Online Streaming Act, the what was it colloquially the Link Tax Act. They're just jamming through these laws that are looking to regulate to death the internet. And it's not a coincidence. It's part of a plan, and not in a conspiratorial sense, just in a sheerly pragmatic one. The Online Streaming Act and the Link Tax Act was intended to give the leg up, to re-gift the advantage to legacy media on the internet because they no longer had the monopoly of radio and television. They now need to compete with independent content creators, independent news outlets like yourself on the internet. And so you got the Online Streaming Act, which now governs the internet the way it governs radio and television. And it's going to only penalize the independent, non-government adjacent actors. The link tax is the government's way of finding a way to subsidize legacy media in a way they couldn't do directly because they've already subsidized them as much as they can through the law and through COVID ads and government ads. Here, they're basically trying to regulate to death independent content creators, or at least create some exposure to regulate the internet. And it's only to give back this benefit, this sort of quasi-monopoly that legacy media had. And so they're going to go out and create exorbitant business expenses to manage and micromanage and now subject the businesses to this czar, so to speak. The what do they call the commission that they're creating? It's going to create exceedingly difficult and costly business decisions, business practices for online platforms, and creating real meaningful exposure for people who engage in words on the internet. But the idea that to pick up and redefine hatred and to jam it through an amendment to the criminal code, it's absurd. And so hopefully this gets some meaningful pushback and doesn't get, I don't know, second, third reading and Senate vote.
With respect to genocide, what I know as a lawyer, as minister, and what I've learned from the stakeholders and the experts whom we have consulted is that there is a determination to demonstrate at the highest level that the maximum penalty for a crime such as advocating or promoting genocide should be increased.
Promoting and advocating genocide. That's the provision that they want to amend to increase the sentence to potentially life in prison. Oh, don't worry. It'll only be under the most egregious circumstances of promoting or advocating genocide. I said, when I read that, I have three questions. What does promoting mean? What does advocating mean? And what does genocide mean? And I'm not saying this to be glib, because we typically and colloquially understand genocide to be calling for the actual murder of an identifiable group at large. Well, if you go to the UN definition of genocide, and you'll see it's so much broader than that. It includes displacement and of a portion, not even of all. So it doesn't just include calling for the murder and the slaughter like you had in Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis. It calls for the displacement, and not of all, but of a part. It has linguistic aspects to it. Ending or suppressing a language at a larger scale or a sufficient scale can qualify as genocide. So what does genocide mean in the context of this law? If you say, I used an example today during my stream, Quebec should only they should only speak French in Quebec. I've heard a lot of separatists say that. Is that genocide? Is that compelling calling for the displacement of a linguistic minority genocide? Who knows? Promoting, advocating. I don't know what these terms mean. And to couple that with the risk of life in prison, I mean, you get murderers. I mean, I don't even think you get convicted rapists and murderers getting life in prison. And you get some who are convicted and sentenced to life getting parole. It's patently absurd to even float the idea of life in prison for words, not for carrying out genocide or murder, or that would be a little bit easier to evaluate. Promoting or advocating. So it's patently preposterous on its face, especially since these terms don't have any clear definitions under the law that I could see. But the idea that these fines, and they're $20,000, $70,000, you remember, and everyone should remember or refresh their memories of the comedian Mike Ward, where he was taken to a human rights tribunal for violating the dignity of Jérémy Gabriel and his mother. And by the skin of Mike Ward's teeth, it got to the Supreme Court, and they said, no, this is not how the tribunals are supposed to be used. They're right now basically trying to legislate, trying to codify what they couldn't do judicially in Mike Ward, and that is to criminalize offensive, hurtful speech. Hateful speech, hate online, hate propaganda online. Where does it end? Where does it start? Nobody knows. And I suspect even if it got passed through the Senate with this phraseology, it would have to get struck down by the Supreme Court at some point for being void for vagueness. I mean, it's the idea that you can define hatred and then make that be something of a crime. Only in North Korea, only in the most totalitarian, authoritarian regimes that Trudeau spends all of his days pretending he has not made Canada into. So I'm living in the States now, and we compare the administrative bureaucracy of Canada to the administrative bureaucracy of the States. And we have basically in Canada relinquished a ton of our most fundamental rights to their administrative tribunals. I mean, they are basically government courts that have no oversight, that are not judges in the true sense of the word. It's wild. America seems to be going the other way. There was this decision, Chevron decision out of the States, Supreme Court decision, where, basically deference towards administrative tribunals. America's moving away from that and fighting back against that, whereas Canada seems to be marching right into it. Imagine these are all government appointees. This is the administrative state interpreting and implementing its own rules, and the only beneficiary of certain interpretations of those rules is the government, through fines, through penalties, exceedingly unfair, and I would dare say like charter violative sanctions for words. It's only a matter of time before this is entirely weaponized politically, if it's not already. I mean, this is a tool of a government to go after ideological adversaries. You have a Danielle Smith out of Alberta, denying certain what they call gender affirming care for what they call trans kids. I mean, denying that is going to be tantamount to genocide, advocating genocide. Denying trans their pronouns, to them, at least some have raised the argument, it's a form of denial of existence, a form of genocide. It's not an if, but a when this ever gets passed, it being weaponized for totally perverse political purposes. And it'll be Trudeau appointees and whoever it is. It's the state abusing and weaponizing outrageous, opaque, ambiguous laws for what will only and inevitably be its own profit.
You are a Canadian YouTuber, and you gain your life with live stream and other video. Do you have any concern about what you're doing and maybe facing prosecution or maybe lifetime for having some dissident political views?
Well, I've been worried about that since I donated to the trucker convoy back in 2020. There's concerns, there's realistic concerns, and then there's theoretical concerns. I know that I never promote genocide. I mean, it's just a stupid thing. That being said, I also know that I say minors should not have what they call gender affirming care, because I consider that to be genital mutilation of children. Is that promoting hatred? I mean, we're not even one step away from that. There are people who consider that to be promoting hatred. I mean, I think that they are intellectually demented in a meaningful sense, but we're not far from there. You got Justin Trudeau going out and taking a knee for BLM protests. If we come out and say it's okay to be white, if we come out and say if you can have black pride, you can have white pride, is this promoting genocide? Is this promoting hatred? Who the hell knows? But the bottom line is nobody needs to know. If it needs to be weaponized, it will be. Much like, what we're seeing sort of out of New York State, which is what I like to call commie New York State. It's not far from Canada. You will have corrupt people in positions of authority who will say, I know what it says, the law, and I know how I can interpret the law. And when you said gender affirming care is child genital mutilation, well, that was promoting hatred against an identifiable group, and take it down, suppress him, fine him, jail him. I mean, I'm not so concerned about it because I'll put up one hell of a fight, but it's the end goal of this piece of legislation, and there's no question about it.
What in that bill that is not already covered by the criminal code?
That's the question I'm going to be asking just day in and day out. And I don't know if I'm allowed swearing, you'll bleep it out, but the pretext is absolute horse crap. The pretext is always, won't someone think of the children, like Reverend Lovejoy's wife? Won't someone please think of the children? That's my question. Child pornography distribution is Canada has some very, very strict child pornography laws. Child pornography, any depiction, stories depicting children engaging, it's illegal. Hosting it, illegal. If there's a violation, revenge porn. I don't know what the specific legislation about what is deemed to be revenge porn, but non-consensual images, there's already legislation, there's already recourse for that. There's nothing that I know of, and I'm asking it in a very sincere way. If anybody knows what amendments to this piece of legislation actually solves a problem that existing criminal and civil remedies do not allow for, I'm all ears. There's a lot of stuff we can all agree on, like we would like to facilitate or, make it easier to take down revenge porn, images that of people put up without their consent that stay up for a long time. It's been an issue for a long time, especially on Twitter, and Elon Musk has been tackling it. But by and large, if that's the issue, there are already laws about disseminating owning, producing, communicating, publishing child pornography. There's images provided without consent, public disclosures of private. There's civil and criminal remedies already. So horse crap is what I say to that. It's the pretext to add hatred. I mean, I wish I could pull up the definition, but it's so preposterous. It is the pretext. You take a little bit of what everyone can agree on. Yes, we want to solve this problem online, but abuse on the internet. There's one solution to dealing with abuse on the internet. If you're that sensitive to it, stay off the internet. You're not going to regulate morality, and that's basically what they're trying to do here pretextually. But it really is only a question of regulating and governing the internet at large.
They try already to pass C11, C36, and previous like other censorship law. How do you compare this one to the previous one?
Well, I mean, it's definitely more extensive because even when they were trying to add hatred to the criminal code under C36, I don't think they had all of these other amendments as well. But I mean, it's just an amazing thing. Like we're seeing this in real time, and they've really exploited the COVID pandemic to jam through and cram through and rush through legislation. It's been the Order in Council gun ban, the Online Streaming Act, the what's the link tax one called? I forget what it's called. They cram him through, and they've got Jagmeet Singh's coalition government with Trudeau. They have the coalition to do it, so to speak. But no, this is definitely, as far as I remember, the most extensive and the most preposterous and the most, I mean, the life in prison for advocating or promoting genocide. It can't and doesn't make sense in any realm of the universe. The fines are astronomical. To me, it looks like another way of also subsidizing government activity where, like, you're living in a country where you have an exodus of tax-paying citizens. And you have an exodus of a population and no population growth and an importation of a demographic that's not necessarily going to be paying much taxes. Hey, what other better way to get blood from a turnip than just to impose these massive fines, potential fines that you can apply willy-nilly to these big corporations? When they imposed the link tax, and Google and Facebook said that we just won't link to news articles in Canada, and then ultimately they agreed to some plan where they're going to, pay up $10-15 million a year and divvy it up among accredited media. I mean, that's basically, it looks like that's what they're trying to do more indirectly here, is just, find a way to divvy up more big tech bucks among the government, because government might be having some liquidity problems itself.
What would you say to the people who say, well, anyway, it doesn't apply to me. I'm not doing live stream. I'm not a content creator. I'm doing nothing online.
Well, very reminiscent of the World War II poem. At first, they came for the union workers, but I said nothing because I wasn't a union worker. Then they came for the socialists. Yeah, then they came for me, and there was no one to say anything. So this never ends well when it starts with a select few. You'll lose your content creators. You'll lose your truly independent news outlets. You'll have a brain exodus and a financial exodus from Canada. But more important than that, if you think it can't or won't ever apply to you because you're not politically disfavored, wake up. It's endless the way it can be abused and will be abused, especially by trolls, but also especially by just bad faith actors who now say, I see dollar signs. Oh, Jeremy Gabriel, he might, if he's a protected class, go after stand-up comics who make jokes about disabilities. People are going to look at this like a lottery now to weaponize not just the criminal code potentially for criminal complaints, the human rights tribunals for financial jackpots.
Don't forget to visit stopthecensorship.ca right now, where you can sign our petition to support our fight against censorship laws and advocate for their repeal. This is really important. So please visit stopthecensorship.ca, sign now, share it, and make your voice heard now before it's too late.